Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. Today I'm doing the full review of my Orient Bambino, and I have to say, after having this watch on wrist for over a month now, I'm going to say that perhaps I should have purchased an Orient prior to this watch itself, because it has been such a good watch to have, such a nice watch to wear, and it is so value packed at this affordable price. But before we jump into the review, I do want to say thank you to everybody who is watching this video and for all of those of you who have subscribed. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you hit on that subscribe button. It really helps to motivate me to continue making these videos, and it's nice to see those subscriber numbers go upwards. Now, if you are interested in picking up one of these Orient Bambinos, they do fluctuate a little bit in price depending on where you look. There's certainly places where you can get them at a really good affordable price. I picked this one up for about 200 Australian dollars, which I don't think is a huge bargain, but it also wasn't exceptionally expensive either. And I think I'm quite happy paying $200 for this watch. And if this particular Bambino isn't the one that interests you, there are plenty of different other versions, different dial types and different colors. But let's jump straight into it and let's have a look at this Orient Bambino. So the Orient Bambino comes in this fairly simple but very nice packaging. It's just a nice cardboard box, but it certainly does what you need it to do. But it seems to come on this very oversized pillow, which is quite nice. It certainly keeps the watch nice and secure. And the other thing worth noting, which I do like, is inside here there's a little bit of foam, which is what's pushing down onto the crystal there. So you know that you're going to get a little bit of safety. You're not going to damage the crystal in transit or if you've got it sitting in the watch box at home. And let's have a look at that watch, shall we? What a lovely looking dress watch, and what a lovely looking dress watch at such an affordable price. And it is also a very wearable, nice size watch. So what are those dimensions? Well, we're looking at a 40.5mm case dimensions. It is a 11.5mm wide, but that includes that very high domed acrylic crystal there. It has a lug-to-lug of 46mm. It has a slightly unusual, slightly annoying 21mm lug width, and on this supplied leather strap with this deployment clasp, it weighs in at 63 grams. Now recently I have been really enjoying and really like owning more and more dress style watches. I don't work in an office, however I do still find that it is a nice style of watch just to wear casually or at home. And this particular watch, it comes in that lovely cream dial, and it is quite a very nice subtle cream. It's not quite a bright white, it's just like a slightly cream, slightly off-white type color. It has a very slight texture to it. It's not particularly obvious, but it is just a pretty dial. It doesn't sunburst at all. It just has a very interesting sort of look and texture to it. And on that dial, what we have is some nice polished applied indices. They are all those slightly inverted triangles with the blocked end. At the 12, at the 9 and at the 6 we have a double sized sort of indice. We have the date window at the 3 o'clock, which is framed. We have these dolphin style hands which are sort of creased down the center but are completely polished, as you can see there, and a very slender second hand which sort of pushes out not quite to the second track around the outside, but just up to those sort of applied indices. Printed on here we have the Orient name, automatic, water resistant, Japan movement, and there is a printed minute track around the outside, and at the hour markers we have a slightly darker spot. And it's a little bit hard to tell, but above that Orient name there is that Orient logo, which either looks slightly applied or it's just a very thick printing that has been put on with those two lines, the crown and that shield underneath. And that shield has that little pop of red, which gives you a little bit of colour on the dial. Now, being a dress watch, and this one in particular doesn't have any lume, so obviously I'm not going to be putting any lume shots into this video. But then we have this nice big domed acrylic crystal, as I showed you before, and it gives you that nice sort of vintage style distortion at extreme angles, which I have to say I do quite like that look. I do appreciate it when watches come with it. It does not interrupt the dial at all or the legibility of what it looks like. And surrounding that acrylic crystal is a high polished static bezel with polished lugs, and on the side it has a really nice case shape, a little bit different from some other watches, and it has this lightly brushed texture across the side in this nice little thin band that you can see there,
and underneath it then turns into a high polish onto a fairly simple case back there. It does have the Orient name on it, the logo, but it is fairly simple. On the other side, very similar brushed pattern leading into that unguarded crown. That crown is fairly small, but it's fairly easy to use. You can see that it is also signed with the Orient logo. Inside here we do have an Orient automatic movement. It does have hand winding. It's very smooth to use, but it does make a little bit of noise. And it also hacks. So let's have a look and see what this movement is like on the time grapher. So as sort of expected, we have a 21,600 vibrations per hour. So it is that sort of slower beat movement. It has a minimal beat error. The amplitude is okay at 251, but slightly disappointing. The rate per hour is about +20 to +25 seconds a day. That is within specifications, but it's probably a little bit higher than I would have liked to have seen on it. Now what about this supplied strap? I have to say it's actually quite a good one. I think it sort of suits the look of the watch. It's very nice and spongy, very soft, conforms to the wrist fairly nicely, and it does come on this nice, easy to use deployment clasp, which allows a lot of room for me to put my hand through. And it has that 2-section attachment. And here we have it on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. It has a really nice wrist presence. It is very low profile, so it really sits down flush to my wrist, and it feels very comfortable, very nice fitting. The lugs do sit a little bit high, however, because the overall thickness of the watch is fairly low, especially if you don't count that acrylic crystal, it does feel nice on wrist. Certainly very easy and legible to read. These watches come in a whole different variations of colors and designs, so this particular one is a very legible, nice looking watch. So what do I like about this watch? What don't I like about this watch? And what would I possibly change? Well, firstly, I think the best part about this watch is the sheer affordability of it. This is a lovely looking automatic watch from a well-known, respected brand, and it comes in at a very affordable price. Overall, it's a very good looking watch. I do love these Dolphin hands whenever they come on any watches, and this is done very well. And that lovely thin side profile with that slight, nice, interesting brushing along that longitudinal is a very nice feature. A little bit different from some other watches, and I certainly do appreciate that. Probably the couple of things that I don't like about it so much is that slightly odd 21mm lug width. That means sizing this to other bands or straps or bracelets that I have in my collection does make it a little bit difficult. And I have to say, I would have loved to have seen it with a slightly more interesting case back. I guess it doesn't really matter, you don't look at it too often, but it is fairly simple. It would have been nice to have that Orient logo being a little bit more deeply engraved, or just having something a little bit more special behind it. So that leaves me with what would I change? Well, there's only two things that I really would change about it. These lugs would be nice if they curved down just a little bit more. It wouldn't change the look of the watch, but it would change the wearability a little bit. It'd probably fit my wrist a tiny bit better. And you're probably going to realize this, or probably know this if you've seen my videos before. When it comes to dress watches, I don't think you really need that date window. I think it upsets that pretty looking dial. I think it would certainly get away without that. Nowadays, when you've got mobile phones, you don't really need a date on the watch, even though it is a nice function to have sometimes. So let's flip back to me now, and I'm going to give you some of my final thoughts of my first Orient watch, my first Bambino, and what I think about it in general.
So as you've seen, this watch is particularly amazing, and it's particularly amazing for the price that it costs. It is a lovely looking, feeling and wearing watch. I'm really impressed by it. I'm really impressed by the build quality, by that movement, by the look of it, and by how it looks on my wrist. I have to say, I'm not quite sure why I have not been buying Orient watches prior to this one, and after knowing and seeing and feeling this one, I'm definitely going to be buying some more Orient watches. So keep an eye out for videos about Orient watches and all the other video content that I do put out onto YouTube about watches and watch related things. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I really appreciate if you watch some of my others. See you later.